The late afternoon light was pouring across my living room, soft and golden, when my phone rang. I glanced at the screen and froze. St. Mary's Hospital. My chest tightened before I even answered. The nurse's voice was calm but urgent. Daniel's mother had suffered a domestic accident and was in surgery. My stomach dropped. I could barely breathe. In a rush, I grabbed my keys with one hand and my phone with the other, my thoughts racing straight to Daniel. He needed to know right away. I called him. Once, twice, then again. Each ring seemed longer than the last, the silence on the other end stretching like a cruel rope pulling tighter around my chest. Daniel, call me now. Your mother's been taken to St. Mary's. Please answer. I begged into his voicemail, my voice trembling. I paced the room, phone pressed against my ear, praying he would pick up. But nothing. The ticking of the clock on the wall mocked me, each second louder, sharper, crueler. Daniel was the man who always answered, even when he pocket-dialed by mistake. But now, when it truly mattered, he was unreachable. My palms grew sweaty, my heart hammering as unease twisted into something darker. This wasn't just about his mother anymore. Why wasn't he answering me? I bit my lip so hard it nearly bled, refusing to cry. I told myself to focus on the emergency, but an unsettling thought kept whispering in the back of my mind, one I didn't want to believe just yet. I tried again, this time dialing his office line, hoping someone could put me through. The receptionist picked up, cheerful at first, then casual as she said, "Mr. Parker didn't come in today. He's on scheduled home office." My blood ran cold. Home office? Daniel never worked from home on Thursdays. He'd always said it threw off his schedule. I hung up, staring at the phone like it had just betrayed me. Something was off, and the knot in my stomach pulled tighter. I whispered to myself, almost in disbelief, "Home office? He never does that. Where are you, Daniel?" My words felt like stones falling into an endless pit. Panic and suspicion wrestled inside me, fighting for space in my chest. My instincts were screaming at me, louder than the pounding in my ears. I felt trapped in a haze of fear, not just for his mother's condition, but for what this sudden lie might mean about him. That's when I remembered the car tracker. It wasn't supposed to be something I ever needed, just a security measure we agreed on for insurance. My fingers shook as I called the provider and asked for the car's location. I held my breath as the operator read it out. A residential address across town, nowhere near St. Mary's, nowhere near his office. I felt my throat tighten, heat rushing to my cheeks. My body was trembling, but I knew exactly what I had to do. I grabbed my bag and headed for the door, my keys clinking like tiny alarms in my hand. Every step felt heavier, my mind caught between two storms, worry for Daniel's mother and the gnawing suspicion about Daniel himself. I couldn't let myself spiral, not yet. But the address from the tracker kept flashing in my head, daring me to face whatever truth was waiting there. My breath was shallow, but my resolve was sharper than ever. Driving across town, the city looked different to me. The streets I knew so well blurred into a tunnel of headlights and traffic lights. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than they ever had before. I kept replaying his silence, the receptionist's casual words, the thought of his mother lying in a hospital bed without her son by her side. My heart ached for her, but it also burned with something else, an anger I wasn't ready to unleash. When I finally turned onto that street, I spotted his car immediately. Parked neatly in front of a house that wasn't ours, it felt like a slap in the face. My pulse quickened, my mouth dry as sand. I pulled over, sitting for a moment with the engine still running, staring at the proof I didn't want to see. My body screamed to storm in, but another part of me whispered to stay calm. I knew the moment I knocked on that door, my life would never be the same again. I stepped out of the car, every nerve in my body buzzing as if the ground beneath me were electric. My feet felt heavy, but my anger carried me forward. I marched up to the door and knocked hard, the sound echoing in my chest like a warning bell. My heart thudded so loudly I swore the whole neighborhood could hear it. Seconds later, the door cracked open, and a woman I didn't recognize stood there, blinking at me with false innocence. "Who are you?" she asked, her tone defensive, almost rehearsed. My blood boiled. I didn't waste time with niceties. Where is he? I demanded, my voice sharp, trembling with both fury and fear. She shook her head, tried to block the doorway, mumbling something about me having the wrong house. Wrong house? My eyes darted past her shoulder, and I could almost feel the truth hanging in the air like smoke after a fire. Without hesitation, I pushed the door wider, stepping inside as she protested weakly. I didn't care. My instincts had already confirmed what my heart dreaded. "Daniel!" I shouted, my voice cracking under the weight of betrayal. My body shook, but my willpower held me upright. And then, from down the hallway, I heard movement, quick, panicked, unmistakably his. Every part of me braced for what I was about to see. He stumbled out of the bedroom, half-dressed, eyes wide like a man caught in the middle of a nightmare. "Emma, this isn't what you think," he blurted, his voice breaking. My stomach turned as I took in the sight, his shirt clutched in one hand, his hair a mess, the scent of cheap perfume floating through the air. My chest burned, not just with rage, but with the raw ache of disbelief. I felt my heart splinter, yet my fury held me steady. "Not what I think?" I spat, tears blurring my vision. "Daniel, your mother is lying in a hospital bed while I've been calling you nonstop, and this is where you are?" My words sliced through the room like glass. He flinched, his shoulders slumping, but he didn't dare step closer. Behind me, the woman lingered, arms crossed as if she had a right to stand there. My skin crawled at her presence, but I refused to look away from him. He opened his mouth again, searching for excuses, but I cut him off with a trembling hand. "Don't. Just don't. Every second you've ignored me today, every call you've let ring out, this is what it was about." My voice was hoarse, but steady. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see guilt all over his face, dripping off him like sweat, and yet he stood frozen, incapable of undoing what I had just uncovered. The room seemed to close in on me, every detail searing into my memory, the tangled sheets behind him, the faint lipstick stain on his collar, the awkward silence pressing against my chest. I could hardly breathe, but my voice came out sharp, laced with fury. "While your mother was being rushed into surgery, this is where you chose to be? Half naked in someone else's bed?" My throat ached, but the anger carried me through. He reached for me, his hand trembling, but I jerked back as if his touch were fire. I had no space left for his pleas. My eyes darted to the woman, who now looked smaller, her confidence slipping into discomfort. For a moment, I almost pitied her, but then I remembered who I was, the wife who'd been lied to, the woman who deserved better than this scene. I stood taller, even as my heart splintered inside me. Daniel's lips moved, searching for words, but I had already heard enough. The betrayal was written across his body, across the silence between us, and across the phone calls he chose not to answer. A storm raged in my chest, but beneath it, a cold clarity began to form. I didn't need him to confess. The truth was sprawled out right in front of me, undeniable and cruel. And I knew the next words out of my mouth would change everything. I forced myself to breathe, to steady the fire racing through my veins. My body wanted to scream, to throw every cruel word I could find at him, but another truth pressed harder: his mother. She was lying in a hospital bed, fighting, and he had no idea. The thought of her, frail, helpless, alone, cut through the chaos in my chest. I clenched my fists, swallowing the lump in my throat. This wasn't about me right now. "Get dressed," I said, my voice sharp but measured. His eyes darted to mine, confused, guilty, searching for mercy that I no longer had. "You need to go to St. Mary's. Your mother is the priority tonight. This," I gestured at the mess around us, at the woman still frozen by the door, "this will wait." My tone left no space for argument, though my heart ached with every word I spoke. Daniel stammered, "Emma, please, don't—" But I cut him off before he could spin another excuse. "Don't you dare waste another second. Get to the hospital. Be the son she needs right now." The words tasted bitter, but they gave me strength. I would not let his betrayal distract from what mattered most. I turned my back on him, my chest heavy, already planning what my next steps would be once his mother was safe. He hesitated, frozen like a boy caught sneaking out past curfew, but this wasn't some childish mistake. My glare cut through him until he finally shuffled toward the bedroom, fumbling for his clothes. I stood in the hallway, my arms crossed tight over my chest, refusing to let him see me falter. Every rustle of fabric, every clumsy movement made my stomach twist, but I stayed rooted, steady, determined not to collapse under the weight of his betrayal. When he returned, shirt buttoned unevenly and face pale, he tried to speak again. "Emma, I can explain." The words nearly broke me, but I lifted my hand, silencing him. "No. Save it. Your explanations mean nothing right now. Get to the hospital. Your mother needs you more than I ever will again." My voice cracked, but I refused to let the tears fall. He had already stolen enough from me. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of watching me crumble. For a fleeting second, I saw regret flicker in his eyes, but I knew better than to mistake it for love. Guilt, maybe. Shame, perhaps. But love doesn't drive a man to another woman's bed while his family is in crisis. Love doesn't hide in silence when the phone keeps ringing. I turned away, grabbing my car keys, forcing myself to move before my anger consumed me. He needed to leave, and I needed to plan what came after. He stood by the door, shifting from one foot to the other like a man who'd lost his ground. "Fine," he muttered at last, grabbing his jacket. "I'll go. Just stop." His voice trailed off, but I didn't answer. I kept my arms folded, my body turned away, showing him the cold shoulder he had earned. The slam of the door behind him echoed through the house, leaving a silence so sharp it cut straight through me. The moment he was gone, my knees buckled. I pressed my hand to the wall, steadying myself as the tears I'd been holding back finally spilled. My body shook with sobs, but underneath the pain, a cold clarity took shape. I wasn't powerless, I wasn't broken. I still had choices, and I would make them wisely. My heart screamed for revenge, but my mind told me to wait, to be smart, to protect myself first. I wiped my face, forcing air back into my lungs. That night, I couldn't bear the thought of sleeping in our bed, in our home that suddenly felt tainted. Instead, I packed a small bag and drove to my friend's house, needing distance, needing space to breathe. As I lay awake in her guest room, one thought repeated in my head like a vow. Once his mother was stable, I would make my move. And when I did, there would be no turning back. The next morning, I walked into our bedroom with a calmness that almost scared me. The chaos of last night had burned through me, leaving behind something colder, sharper, more deliberate. His side of the closet stared back at me, shirts lined up, shoes neatly stacked, ties he'd worn to family dinners. I began pulling them out one by one, folding them into boxes. With each shirt, each pair of shoes, I felt like I was reclaiming a piece of myself he'd tried to diminish. I wasn't crying anymore. My hands were steady, my breathing even. It wasn't about rage now, it was about control. I stacked his clothes neatly, zipped up his suit bag, and packed his toiletries with a precision that felt like justice. Every item I touched was a reminder. He didn't belong here anymore. Our home wasn't his sanctuary. He had already traded it for someone else's bed. This was my way of drawing the line, silently but decisively. When the last box was taped shut, I sat for a moment on the edge of the bed, staring at the pile. It looked so small, so insignificant compared to the storm he'd unleashed inside me. But this was the first step. I picked up my phone and called a delivery service, my voice calm and businesslike. "Please deliver a package to 12 Maple Lane, the Turner residence. It contains Mr. Parker's personal effects. Leave it with them." My hands didn't tremble once. I waited until his mother was discharged before I made the next move. Timing mattered. I wasn't going to burden her while she lay in a hospital bed, but once she was stable, I needed them to know the truth. I called Daniel's parents and asked for a meeting at their home. My voice was steady, polite even, though my heart pounded in my chest. They agreed, unaware of the storm I was about to bring into their living room. When I arrived, Mrs. Parker greeted me with tired eyes, the strain of the past days etched into her face. "Emma, is everything all right? Is Daniel at the hospital?" she asked, worry lacing her voice. I sat down across from them, my posture straight, my hands folded carefully in my lap. "Thank you for meeting with me," I began, my tone quiet but firm. "I came because you deserve to hear the truth from me." Their expressions shifted, concern deepening, confusion setting in. Mr. Parker leaned forward. "The truth? What do you mean?" For a moment, I softened, glancing at Mrs. Parker with compassion. "She's stable now, thanks to the doctors, but I need to tell you something painful." My throat tightened, but I pushed on. While she was in surgery, Daniel wasn't at the hospital. He was across town, with another woman. The words hung heavy, impossible to take back. Mr. Parker shot up from his chair, his face red, disbelief written all over it. "What? Daniel would never—" he started, but I reached into my bag and pulled out the evidence. A photo of his car parked in front of that house. A copy of the delivery receipt for the boxes already sent to their address. I placed them gently on the coffee table, my voice steady. "I didn't come here to humiliate him. I came so you'd know the truth. I won't live a lie." Mrs. Parker's hand trembled as she picked up the photo. Her lips parted as if to defend her son, but nothing came out. I watched the shock ripple across her face, followed by a sorrow so deep it mirrored my own. "Emma," she whispered, her voice breaking. My heart twisted for her, but I couldn't soften my stance. "I've already arranged for his things to be here," I said firmly. "He won't be coming back to our home." Silence filled the room, thick and unbearable, broken only by Mrs. Parker's quiet sob. I stood, smoothing my skirt with a composure I didn't entirely feel. I loved him. I was loyal. But loyalty without respect is a prison, and I've just stepped out of it. Their eyes followed me as I walked to the door, leaving the evidence behind. With each step, I felt lighter. I had said what needed to be said, and now the rest was up to them. The fallout came faster than I expected. That same evening, Daniel called me from the hospital parking lot, his voice pleading through my voicemail. "Emma, please, don't do this in front of my parents. I made a mistake. I was confused." I listened once, then deleted it. My hands didn't shake this time. His words felt hollow, like scraps tossed after a feast. He had made his choices, and now he would live with them. I contacted a lawyer the next morning. Sitting in that office, papers spread across the polished desk, I felt both terrified and empowered. Terrified because divorce meant untangling years of love, lies, and finances. Empowered because each signature, each form, was a step closer to reclaiming my life. I refused to let his betrayal chain me to him. My voice was steady when I told the lawyer, "I want full separation, no turning back." Now, meanwhile, my support network closed around me like a protective shield. Friends who had always been there showed up with meals, with laughter, with silent hugs when I couldn't hold myself together. My family called every night, reminding me I wasn't alone. Their voices softened the edges of my pain. For the first time in days, I slept through the night, knowing I had a plan, and knowing he no longer had power over me. Daniel's parents eventually confronted him, just as I knew they would. I heard about it secondhand, whispers from a mutual friend who said the fight was explosive. His father's disappointment, his mother's tears, it was all laid bare. Part of me ached for them. They didn't deserve to be dragged through his betrayal, but another part of me felt vindicated. At least now the truth wasn't mine alone to carry. His shame was finally visible to the people who had raised him. He tried calling again, messages piling up on my phone. "We can fix this," one said. Another begged, "Don't do this to us, Emma. Think about our life together." Each word felt like salt on an open wound. I didn't reply. Instead, I set boundaries so clear they might as well have been walls. My lawyer's number became the only channel between us. If he wanted to talk, he could do it through legal documents. I was done giving him my time. The more distance I put between us, the more I began to breathe again. I found myself lingering in my kitchen in the mornings, letting the smell of fresh coffee comfort me. I walked through the house without the weight of suspicion pressing on my shoulders. Even the silence felt different, no longer empty, but peaceful. For the first time in years, I realized I was learning how to be free, even in the middle of all this wreckage. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was mine to walk, and that made all the difference. Some days the grief hit hard, a smell, a song, the memory of a moment that used to feel safe. But even in those cracks, I found strength I didn't know I had. Each tear was a release, each step forward proof that I wasn't defined by his betrayal. I was more than the lies he told and the silence he gave me. Practical steps became my armor. I opened new accounts, secured the house under my name, and sketched out a future without him in it. Therapy sessions helped me untangle the knots he'd tied in my heart, and slowly, I began to trust myself again. The woman staring back at me in the mirror wasn't broken. She was scarred, yes, but those scars told a story of survival and courage, a story I was proud to carry. By the time the paperwork was nearly complete, I no longer felt fear when his name appeared on my phone. I felt nothing but clarity. He wasn't welcome back, not in my house, not in my life, not in my heart. That chapter was closed for good. And as I stood at my window one evening, watching the streetlights flicker on, I knew I had already started writing the next one, on my own terms, with my own strength. Months later, life began to settle into a rhythm I never thought I'd find again. The papers were signed, the separation official, and the weight of his betrayal no longer sat on my chest every morning. Instead, I filled my days with work projects, long walks, and moments of quiet that felt like blessings rather than punishments. Therapy gave me tools to rebuild, piece by piece, until I realized I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Daniel's absence was no longer a wound but a doorway. Without his lies cluttering my days, I discovered space for myself, for joy, for laughter I hadn't heard in years. Friends rallied around me, pulling me into dinners and late-night conversations, reminding me of who I was before the shadows of his deception dulled my light. And slowly, that woman, the strong, vibrant one I had almost forgotten, came back to life. Of course, the past didn't disappear. His parents kept their distance, caught between love for their son and the shame of his actions, and Daniel tried once or twice to break through the walls I'd built. But by then, I was too far along in my healing to even consider letting him back in. I'd chosen integrity when it mattered most, and now that choice was shaping a future I could actually look forward to. One afternoon, sitting in a cafe with a close friend, she leaned in and asked softly, "Do you ever regret it? Asking him to go to the hospital instead of confronting him right then and there?" I stirred my coffee, a small smile tugging at my lips. "No," I answered, my voice steady. "I put the right thing first, his mother's life. That doesn't excuse him, but it proves I was better than his worst moment. I walked away with my integrity intact." She nodded, her eyes warm, and for the first time in a long time, I felt pride in myself. Not pride for enduring his lies, but for refusing to let them define me. That choice, to act with dignity when he acted with betrayal, wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about reclaiming the woman I had always been. The woman who deserved honesty, loyalty, and respect. The woman who was finally standing tall again. When I left the cafe, the air outside felt lighter, fresher, as if the world had opened its arms to me. I walked down the street, keys jingling in my hand, not as someone abandoned, but as someone free. The shadows of that house across town no longer haunted me. My story wasn't about him anymore. It was about me, choosing myself, choosing peace, choosing a life where I would never again accept less than I deserved. The final time Daniel tried to reach out, months after everything had crumbled, I let the call ring and fade away. There was nothing left to say. His voice, his excuses, his regret, none of it held power over me anymore. I wasn't the woman begging for answers, pacing in the living room with tears in my eyes. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone who had walked through fire and come out whole. I found comfort in the small, steady things, watering the plants on my windowsill, journaling at night, laughing until my stomach hurt with the people who loved me. Healing wasn't loud, it was quiet, patient, sometimes messy, but always moving forward. Each day carried me farther from the pain, closer to the woman I was becoming. And every step reminded me that choosing myself had been the bravest act of all. As I locked my front door one morning and stepped into the sunlit street, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The world was still imperfect, but I was free. Free from lies, free from betrayal, free to live with integrity. My story hadn't ended in heartbreak. It had begun there, yes, but it blossomed into something far greater. A life rebuilt not on what I lost, but on everything I finally chose to claim for myself.